Many, many years ago, it was foretold by a wise man that a podcast would come and change the world. It would revolutionize the way we think about the world around us, the Bible, our faith journeys. This is not that podcast.
Not at all. We're still searching.
We're still searching. Good morning, everyone, or evening, or afternoon, or siesta time. Whenever you are listening to us, we welcome you. My name is Derek Wilson from the cloudy and rainy, because we're getting into the winter season in the Vancouver Island. I am joined here, as always, by my beautiful and lovely host, Tim Miller.
Howdy.
Howdy. From England. Cheerio. Let's take a ride on the loo. No, that's toilet, isn't it? Loo's toilet, right? The tube.
That'd be quite the journey. Yeah. If the
Follow
tube
me,
was
let's
full
do
of
it.
loos. Yeah.
Let's do a group poop. Welcome. We
Yeah.
are starting off spectacularly today. As you can tell, we are in fine form. We welcome you.
Feeling it.
We are continuing our reading of some of the New Testament. I think
Matthew
we're doing
7.
what?
Matthew 7.
Matthew 7. This is like our 30-something episode podcast. We're over half a year. So if you listen to one a week, you've got like 30 weeks covered. That's almost, 9 months or something? Something like that. Not quite, 8.
We're also not the math podcast.
Yeah, we're also on the map.
If
You're
you
going to
figure that
realize very soon that we do not know a lot. What's it like, Nacho Libre? People think I don't know a buttload about the gospel, but I do. Wow, this is turning out to be great. This is why I should not introduce. Well, Tim, do you have anything to add?
So much to yeah. No, it's as Derek did hint at the beginning, while also it was just, this is a chance to jump in together, have a conversation, look at the Bible, give God some space to challenge us, particularly challenge us on the things that we may have once thought or believed. We were talking a little bit earlier on about the Homebrewed Christianity podcast, which is one of those ones which is very much the foretold, prophesied podcast that would come and change the world. But they've been doing a series with two theologians, Brian McLaren and Diana Butler Bass. And Diana speaks about something called the second naivete, which is about returning to the same place, but with a new vision or a new understanding or a new openness. And I think that's really resonated with me as I think about this kind of opportunity to come back to the Bible and sit in smaller passages and just ask those questions about what are we reading? What is God saying? What's the challenge for us today? And we do hope that amongst all the bizarre things that we'll throw at you, particularly at the beginning and end, that somewhere in the middle, there's some content that is actually life-giving to you and to the journey of faith that God is walking with you on. And we hope and pray that at some point we can be a part of that in a helpful way. If not least, just to say, this is the path you don't want to take. Stay with everyone else.
This is the wide path. Stick to the narrow.
Yeah, exactly. Which we're going to hear about today. So prophetic, Derek, prophetic.
Yes. Well, thank you for saving that introduction, that train wreck of an introduction. Tim, we are going to read the scripture for today, and then we'll do a pause, and then we'll go through it again. Like always, we're going to talk about kind of some things that stick out to us, some questions, and then set the timer for 20 minutes. Try to be close to it, never are, and talk about some of our questions and thoughts. So, Tim, would you like to start us off?
Very happy to. So our reading this week comes from Matthew chapter 7, verses 12 to 23. So whatever you wish that others would do to you, do also to them. For this is the law and the prophets. Whatever you wish, or enter by the narrow gate, for the gate is wide and the way is easy that leads to destruction, and those who enter by it are many. For the gate is narrow and the way is hard that leads to life, and those who find it are few. Beware of false prophets who come to you in sheep's clothing, but inwardly are ravenous wolves. You will recognize them by their fruits. Are grapes gathered from thorn bushes or figs from thistles? So every healthy tree bears good fruit, but the diseased tree bears bad fruit. A healthy tree cannot bear bad fruit, nor can a diseased tree bear good fruit. Every tree that does not bear good fruit is cut down and thrown into the fire. Thus you will recognize them by their fruits. Not everyone who says to me, Lord, Lord, will enter the kingdom of heaven, but the one who does the will of my Father who is in heaven. On that day, many will say to me, Lord, Lord, did we not prophesy in your name and cast out demons in your name and do many mighty works in your name? And then will I declare to them, I never knew you. Depart from me, you workers of lawlessness.
So whatever you wish that others would do to you, do also to them. For this is the law and the prophets. Enter by the narrow gate, for the gate is wide and the way is easy, that leads to destruction. And those who enter by it are many. For the gate is narrow and the way is hard that leads to life, and those who find it are few. Because of false prophets who come to you in sheep's clothing, but inwardly are ravenous wolves, you will recognize them by their fruits. Are grapes gathered from thorn bushes, or figs from thistles? So every healthy tree bears good fruit, but the diseased tree bears bad fruit. A healthy tree cannot bear bad fruit, nor can a diseased tree bear good fruit. Every tree that does not bear good fruit is cut down and thrown into the fire. Thus you will recognize them by their fruits. Not everyone who says to me, Lord, Lord, will enter the kingdom of heaven, but the one who does the will of my Father who is in heaven. On that day, many will say to me, Lord, Lord, did we not prophesy in your name and cast out demons in your name and do many mighty works in your name? And then will I declare to them, I never knew you. Depart from me, you workers of lawlessness. Well, Tim, any thoughts or phrases that stick out to you?
Yeah, the one that stuck out to me both times is that final four words, you workers of lawlessness. That was the one that hit me. How about yourself?
The whole thing. Conviction.
The
Um,
Bible.
um, I think the Lord, prophesy
Mm,
your name, cast out demons, um,
mm,
and the those who find it are few. I think stuck out to me.
yeah,
Um,
yeah.
question. Oh, sorry. Questions.
Oh gosh, I think the thing that I'm really um, uh, really kind of coming back to, which is something that's I know has been kind of coming up in my conversations on here over the last few months, is just that sense of like, of how do we recognize fruit, and what does it then mean to follow Jesus? Because it seems to be that the people who are quickest to kind of promote it are the ones who Jesus is saying are likely to have completely missed it. Um, and and that phrase, for the gate is narrow and the way is hard that leads to life, and those who find it are few. I'd like to, yeah, kind of talk a little bit about those things. How about yourself?
Other than questioning my own faith journey,
We've only got 20 minutes, Derek, so
I got 20 minutes. Um,
years 5 to 10, that's what you get.
yeah, I think the question of, well, you hit it with your question, and I just want to talk about it. Like, I don't have questions about it. I just want to work it out. So
All right.
let's just do
Well,
it.
all right. So when I was asking that question or framing that question, what, and then you saying about like your faith journey. So what is it that's going on with you in that?
Well, the thing that sticks out to me about this is there's two things that I'm kind of working through right now that I think apply to this. One is I am listening and reading The Orthodox Heretic
Okay.
by Peter Rawlings. And the other one is this the men's group that meets Thursday mornings, and we're talking about um, the the relationship aspect, and really about the whole what is the church about,
Mm,
and actually doing it. Like, what's the are we actually doing what we think we're
mm,
doing? And the Peter Rawlings part that I was referring to is he does this little parable. I think it's chapter 1, where he talks about in this society, this country, whatever, being a Christian is illegal. And this one man's brought before the judge, and the judge looks at all the evidence, and there's tons of evidence. Like, the guy's highlighted his book, it's well worn. He's got pictures and videos of him singing worship songs, being in worship services, crying, doing paintings. He's written poetry, Christian poetry. He's done all these things that you would say is a Christian thing. And then judge goes away for a couple hours or a little bit of time, and then comes back and says, "You're innocent." The guy's relieved, but then he's like, "Wait, hold on. What about all this evidence?"
mm.
And the judge, and correct me if I'm wrong, Tim, or we're missing something. The judge is, well, these are all inward things. We don't need armchair theologians. Yeah, you read your Bible, you pray, you do worship services and stuff, but you're not fighting the system that is oppressing you right now. You're not fighting this overall society,
Yeah.
things that don't line up with your gospel. So we don't
Yeah.
have an issue with you doing these personal inward things because they're not
Yeah.
working for the outward, for the betterment of everyone.
Yeah.
They're just something you do. It's a hobby to you. And then with that podcast, the after class one, fellowship and um, sharing with one another and growing with one another, and the family aspect of how, as the church, are we um, portrayed, or are we doing our best at being a close knit family that grows together, that walks with each other, that grows together, so much so that it's inviting to other people where they don't have
Mm,
that. We are the essence of it. We are the we've got it down so much that people, that's our evangelism, where people want to come and be part of it because we
yeah.
are committed to one another and what we read about and what we
Mm,
see in the Bible. We're that committed to it, living and growing and loving one another, that it's inviting to other people. And I'm
mm,
not doing that. I
mm,
would say if they, like in Peter Rawlings, if I was put before the judge, I'd have all that evidence too, but walking it out in an impactful way for my society, other than just saying God loves you and buying food for one someone or giving money to charity that fights homelessness or something. Not much that I do. And as far as growing with the church and living my faith out that way, it's it's what I've grown up with. You come to church, you kind of grow, you do
Yeah.
a few Bible studies, you pray for someone if they're having trouble, or maybe help them move or something, but it's not deep. Like, it's not, I'm gonna, even through the hard times, I'm gonna walk with you. So when I read this Bible verse about the Lord cast out demons, and we prophesied in your name, and the growing of bad fruit. I mean, my fruit's probably not, uneatable, but it's not healthy by by any stretch of the imagination. And if I went before God, I could say, yeah, I prophesied and cast out demons and healed and whatever, not me, but God, whatever. But it's not. The only difference between my life and the life of someone who isn't in the church is that I go to church and I believe in a higher power. Like, there's got to be something more to this, right? Like, we're talking about living the gospel out now. It's not just something you do after heaven, but how am I living that out now? Is it just helping out people, or is it actually being involved and in people's lives and actually fighting for the people that can't fight for themselves in this society that seems to benefit the rich, and the poor get left behind, and that population is growing? Anyway, that's my rant. What do you got?
So yeah, I think what I was reminded of as you were saying those things was an analogy that's I feel like came from a talk I heard from Peter Rollins sometime. And he was just talking about how kind of culturally and so communally and individually, we in the West operate on a very pressure release system, and so there's a lot of things that we would point to as being like, these things are unjust, or these things are wrong, or these things bother me or irritate me. And he was saying that as long as there's enough of a pressure release valve in effect from those things, you can rant about them and nothing can change, and you can still feel like it's okay. And he was talking about, like, actually the pressures, that kind of pressure cooker, with a pressure valve that works to kind of maintain an actual kind of status quo that we all, in some ways, whether we articulate it or not, have bought into. And I think you're right, is like in the church we've done the same thing, which is that there's these things which we can say, if there's enough time that goes into these activities, if somebody's doing these certain things. Obviously growing up, every day you were asked, have you done personal prayer and Bible reading? And that was like
Read
the
your
first
Bible, pray
confession
every
you
day, and
had
you
to.
grow, grow.
And but actually the thing about it was, like, as long you didn't actually even have to do it every day, as long as you could lament the fact that you weren't doing it every day. You felt that it was that you were engaged with what was the aspiration, right? And I think that's the thing I feel like so much with my own faith, which I was really resonating with those things you were talking about, which is that sense that as long as I can articulate a lament for not being where I think I should be, I actually don't have to strive to gain those things or to be a part of that. I can lament the fact that we live in this Western civilization, which doesn't have, where capitalism actually doesn't have a trickle down of money, but where the rich keep getting richer and the poor keep getting poorer. And as long as I can lament that, I don't have to participate in that for any sort of change, because I believe that my lament is what, which is what identifies me as, not in power or not in privilege. But as we've seen, like through all the things to do with racism and this whole kind of thing about, you can be racist or anti-racist, but you can't just be not racist, because like, and there's the way that that's been actually reframed, and that I find kind of personally really helpful.
Yeah, it makes me think of it's the thought that counts, right? Like,
Yeah, yeah,
right?
exactly,
Like it's
exactly. Yeah.
yeah. Like
So so
I
about
don't have
that,
to
I
do that, but if I think about it and I discuss it in my
yeah,
group, how we should be doing stuff, but nothing
yeah,
ever changes.
yeah,
It's we're progressive. Like I
yeah,
remember growing up in a church, we were known as the progressive church, but mostly it
mm,
was just because we were super spiritual and speaking in tongues and
mm,
flags and paintings and stuff.
mm,
But now when I look back at them, like we like in our theology and the way we lived, we were not progressive. We were
yeah,
very much not. But it's that outward
yeah,
thing
yeah,
contained in us.
yeah,
And
yeah,
how did that work out for
yeah.
the community? And
And
like,
oh,
yeah,
yeah, go ahead.
well, I was gonna say like every church does little things like food drives or giving money to something else, but it seems to be putting a band-aid on a bullet wound, right?
Mm,
Like we do all the little stuff, but very rarely are we going to the higher ups, the politicians, and be
yeah,
like, you got to do something here. Like,
yeah,
how
yeah.
can I help? Or
Hmm.
even like the mayor or something, how can I
Mm,
help fight this? Like,
yeah,
not and there's always that tension between, well, do I give, like, how much can I do before I'm stretched thin, and
mm,
how much, like, still taking care of ourselves
hmm,
and not doing this, but at the same
yeah,
time, if we consider them part of us, like the
yeah,
we're in this community, these are our brothers and
hmm,
sisters, then it is giving towards us. um,
yeah,
yeah,
yeah. And I think that's the interesting thing about, and again, this is actually one of the parable. I think it's one of the parables in the Orthodox Heretic, which is actually about a community of people who took so seriously Jesus' thing that if someone asks you to go a mile, you go two. If
yeah,
someone asks you for a coat, you give them your shirt as well. And he talks about how actually the culture of doing what was radical by in those words of Jesus, but by taking them too literally, meant that you just institutionalized what was radical, which then actually neuters it from being that
yeah,
radical disruption. And
yeah,
you see that actually interestingly, I think, in the Old Testament with the way that prophets aren't the voices kind of calling from the wilderness, but are become people who actually are brought into the very kind of chambers of the king as the wise person who must prophesy for the king about the empire that they're in.
yeah,
And I feel like that for myself. And I know, like, I can't speak for the people in the congregation because it's their own experiences and stuff, but I
yeah,
do feel like, for me personally, I feel like there's a point where I'm saying the same sort of things in all my sermons, and it might be like in a sense that I'm using different language, but I'm saying all these things. And what actually I would probably want to do on a Sunday morning one time is just say, for the next 10 minutes, instead of listening to me, I want you to think of one thing you can do when you leave this place that's going to make a difference in the world. you
yeah,
know and
yeah,
what does that look like? And interesting, actually, going back to a shared experience we've had. I had the opportunity to shape something like that at Moose Lake Camp those 2 years that I was invited to become the preacher, or invited to be the preacher for the senior camp. And it was, for me, it was a really kind of profound and shaping experience. But I look back at that, and it was still what I could never capture in that time and in that space was the fact that we weren't in people's lives.
mm,
Like they had committed to a week outside of their normal life where they were actually up for anything happening because it wasn't their day to day, and then they could choose what they wanted to or didn't want to take back with it in the same way I could.
mhm,
But it's that question about, like, the gate is narrow and the way is hard that leads to life. And I'm just like, I keep I keep striving for these things, and I tell myself it's hard. It's hard for me to know how many shirts is too many to have in my closet before I need to give them away to somebody who has no shirts, because I
Mhm.
need to make sure that I'm not cold. And
Yeah.
it's like I don't think that's what Jesus is saying here, but
Yeah.
but yeah,
Like when it talks about the few, like I always grew up thinking the few was the church. Like in the
it
global
was definitely us. Yeah.
global community, we are the few. But what if the few is the few in the church? Right? Like
Hmm.
it's actually life. Like what we have is singing and going to church and worshiping and feeling good about ourselves, and that kind of stuff is fine to a point, but it maybe it's not the life that we're supposed to give. Like maybe the way to life is actually to give instead of receive,
Hmm.
and yet we're stuck on the receiving from church and not the giving. And I forget who said this, but they were talking about Jesus, and they said, if you want to know how Jesus lived his life, the only thing you need to know is that he was crucified. They don't crucify people that are part of the system and, you know, being like that was saved for the bandits and the like
Insurrectionists.
the insurrectionists,
Yeah.
the people that were fighting the system. Like that was
Mm.
designed for those people.
Mm.
So if you want to know anything, like he wasn't part of like the government or the church leadership or whatever. Like he was crucified because he was fighting those things.
Yeah.
And I'm not.
Hmm. Yeah. And interesting, like the framing of this section here too, where it starts with, so whatever you wish that others would do to you, do also to them, for this is the law and the prophets. And I
Hmm.
will declare to them, I never knew you. Depart from me, you workers of lawlessness.
Hmm.
And what I find so challenging about that is that Jesus says, whatever you wish others would do to you, do to them,
Hmm.
not wait for somebody else to do something so you can reciprocate it. and
Yeah.
and like it's
Yeah.
you do to people what you want them to do to you, not because they will do it or if they ever do it, but because you want to
Mm,
live in a way that is reflective of how you wish others would see you and live with you as well. And he says that's the law and the prophets. And then the
uh,
people who don't do that are actually workers of lawlessness.
yeah. Like the invite people to your supper table, but only the ones that can never repay you.
Yeah,
And so, yeah,
biblical. Ooh.
like I always read that chapter, and I'm like, oh, it's talking about the um, what do you call it, the prosperity gospel people and how
Mhm.
they're missing the point and stuff. But I think it's more than just that. Like I think we really
Yeah,
need to take a look at our lives and the way we even view church and our communities around us. Um,
yeah.
what I have is yours, and
Mhm.
how does that work out? And am I, if perfect love drives out all fear, and I've got fear that I'm going to run thin,
Mhm.
then maybe I'm not living in that love that I know God's going to take care of me
Yeah,
or
yeah,
provide.
yeah. And not recognizing, I think, actually the place of community, right? Like the crazy thing is that we've bought into faith being so individualistic that even in what you've said, which every word you've said, I'm like, I would have said that exact sentence.
Yeah.
But because I'm on the other side hearing it in our context right now, what I wanted to say is like you said, can I give everything away and then still trust God to care for me?
And
And it's
not
like,
other people.
can you give
Yeah.
everything into the community, trusting that the community is there to care for you?
Yeah.
Obviously, God, works in those things. I'm not trying to push him out of the picture or anything like that.
Yeah.
But it is that sense that actually we even are so individualistic that we want to say that, we will kind of choose to give all the things away, and then God can still care for us. And
Mhm.
then, well, God cares for me, I can then care for other people.
Yeah.
But actually, as you're saying at the beginning, that sense of like, what does it mean to actually be a community that leans on each other, that is vulnerable with each other, that is open with each other? Because the crazy thing is too is like hospitality, how we run it often it comes from a position of power. And
Mm,
I still use those prayers, like I say, I pray for those who are less fortunate than myself, as if what I have is anything to do with me, or as if what I have is something that it's okay if I if I keep it for myself, because I recognize that other people don't have it. Like
yeah,
it's not mine. Like, and I think like that's the thing I find challenging about the early church too, is that sense, like, and the whole story of Ananias and Sapphira,
yeah,
which is just that, like, if you claim with your mouth that this is God's for
yeah,
the people of God, and you give it up in that way,
yeah.
then recognize that you are participating in something else that isn't about you and
Mm.
yourself individually, but actually is about your, that kind of common sharing,
And I
which
don't
is,
think with Ananias and Sapphira that it would have been an issue if they had just been honest. Like if they just said, we sold this land, here's 50% or something,
yeah,
and they kept it. I don't think that would have been an issue. But it's the lying, yeah, that's
yeah,
everything we got. And so, what in my own life, or as a church, what in the community
mm,
that I'm involved in, are we saying
mm,
that Jesus wants, or that we should do, and yet not doing? Like,
yeah,
yeah, we're doing stuff in the community, or we're doing everything we can,
yeah.
but we're not.
And I guess,
Maybe we
and
just
I
need to
think
be
that,
honest.
yeah, and I think that's the thing, like for me personally, what I feel, that kind
So
of
you're talking
challenge in
personally
this.
again. No, I'm kidding.
I So when I was, no, it's that, is that like, what have I constructed in my external spirituality or practices,
Yeah.
which are actually the very things which are stopping me from doing the thing that God is actually asking. As you just
Mhm.
said, that question of like, what does God want more than, yeah, what is God asking of me, that actually is that hard road that's going to lead to life, that is for other people, that isn't about my own place in the world. And what have I constructed that makes me believe I'm doing it, so that I don't have to actually walk that path.
Well, I think it comes back to what you're saying about do to others that you wish to do to them. What do I wish that the community would do for me? What do I what do I need from the community? And then do that for the community, and have that grow. Right? Like I,
It's,
it's just like, oh man, like I don't know what my journey is lately, but it's just, what are you what is what is your faith? Like what is your faith journey? What does it mean to be a follower of Jesus? And I got to be honest with you, it's radically different the more I get into it and the more I think about it than I grew up believing that it was
mm,
just say the sinner's prayer, go to church, tithe, and
mm,
stay away from dark places and make sure your holiness doesn't get dirty and all that. And that's basically it. Like it's very personal, it's very individualistic, and I lied to myself thinking that if I was part of the church body and we were all doing it, then we're doing the community thing. But it's not. It's deeper than that. It's
yeah. Well, you've landed us in deep waters at 20 minutes, Derek. So we're gonna
that's
we're gonna
20
just
minutes. That was a quick
we
20 minutes.
yeah, we're gonna let people sit and stew in that.
Yeah. Yeah.
But
So
yeah,
okay, so in the comments, comment on how the the body of Christ can actually be living out this community thing. How can we actually be what we need in our own lives? I
yeah,
could just the God will just come in and do what he wants to do, and he'll fill in the gaps that we have. I mean, if we're the hands and feet, if we're the ambassadors of the kingdom,
mm,
then what are we actually doing? And how can we do it better?
there you go.
You know,
There you go.
so
Well,
comment.
Yeah. And next week we'll be back again with the final verses of chapter 7 from Matthew. So if you want to read ahead, and then in 2 weeks' time we'll be revisiting, revisiting the whole of the chapter. And I think if you think back to kind of Matthew 5, the beginning of the Sermon on the Mount with the Beatitudes, and some of the stuff that we're talking about, it is that interesting, contrast of, the ideals and what God is doing, and then recognizing our place in it, and what we're called to do, but not just as individuals, but as a community of people who believe in something bigger than ourselves, and believe that the work of God is unique. And I'm just gonna stop talking. I'm
Yeah,
done. That's it.
let's just sit in there for a
That's
little
it.
bit.
There you go.
Okay,
Got nothing
blessings.
else. We'll see you next week.
See you next week. Toodles.
Peace.